Welcome back to the Kingfisher Podcast with Eric and Bron Whitley. We're really glad that you're joining us once again today.
Welcome back, everyone. We've had an interesting week this week. We had a cyclone, actually.
Well, that's what they called it. It was really just a little bit of rain and wind. Now, for us, some people really got it bad.
It was bad in some places. Where we are is fairly sheltered. But yeah, there was flooding around here, though. We did get some flooding, and we went and had a look at the flood waters.
We did. Nothing for our home. We were thankfully saved from that, so we didn't have any problems from that. Just lost power for a couple of days, which is always fun with kids at home and schools closed.
Wondering
and all that good
how
stuff.
long the food's going to last.
Yes.
Oh, and then, there was nothing in the grocery stores. There's only just starting to get food in the grocery stores again now.
Still no bananas. Yes, we have no bananas today.
Every shelf was bare.
It has been that way, but thankfully God really took care of us, and it was kind of like a nice little, as Bridget Jones says, a mini break.
It was a mini break, and we had to just basically be inventive about, okay, what do we have in the fridge that needs to get eaten and that we could turn into a meal?
Yes, got creative there.
But anyway, we're glad things are back to normal. Everyone's back at school. The power's back on. The flooding's gone.
And we're back podcasting.
Yay.
So today, I mentioned last week that I might share some stories of spiritual warfare and things that I've done with clients and with other people, some inner healing ministry, that sort of thing, as well as like some house cleansing. So I thought we might just share some stories today, which hopefully will be entertaining and fun for a few people.
Yeah, I love hearing about the stories. I have some of my own, but I love hearing yours as well. And it's really fun to see the way that God always comes through. I love that.
Yeah, God often surprises me how he responds and what happens. Because we often think, when we talk about spiritual warfare, we often think it's this head-to-head battle. And we've got to say the right thing or do the right thing, or else the enemy's going to win, right? But God often surprises me how little he involves me. Like, he just often will just do things.
Yeah, like we're just watching. Oh, that was amazing.
It's a lot like when Jesus would heal people. I think people were surprised when he spit in mud and rubbed it in people's eyes to heal blindness. It's just something I wouldn't have come up with that as a way to heal blindness, And
obviously he didn't need to do that.
No.
So it's just interesting.
And sending people to go bathe in a river, and like he just does things his own way, as we know, because he's God. And it's fun and exciting often to just sort of watch what God does. So
you've had clients over the years, many clients, thousands of clients, where you've led them through inner healing and deliverance. But you've had one in particular who we've actually become friends with. We've become friends with their family. And it was a fairly intense case that took you many years of meeting with and praying for and counseling her.
Yes. For sake of privacy, we'll call her Lisa. And Lisa is somebody who's very dear to me at this point. Like, she's a very good friend and a person who encourages me to this day. Like, she's probably one of my biggest encouragers, and just kind person. When they have us over for dinner, my goodness, do they spoil us, But that was not always the case with Lisa.
Yeah.
I probably first met her in about 2013, and we really sort of finished active ministry with her probably 10 years later, about 2023 is about when we
it was a long time.
It was a long journey for them and a long journey for me. I would credit a lot of what I know from just being a part of her life and her journey. God showed me a whole lot of stuff through just ministering to her and her family. So Lisa comes from a generational satanic family. So they worked and lived in a satanic cult, and as such, as a child, had a lot of abuse and a lot of things happened to her, a lot of trauma, and the results of that left her in a very broken and very hard place.
Yeah.
So on top of just like the emotional, physical, sexual trauma and abuse that she received, there's also the spiritual abuse that she went through. And part of her journey, like we can tell a lot of stories about Lisa, but I would say, maybe 6 years into doing ministry with her, 5 or 6 years, it was a long time. We came to a point where there was a demonic spirit that had a lot of authority in her life, and it had been put there on purpose, and it was obstinate. Like I've faced and cast out a lot of demons in my time, and quite honestly, most of the time it's really boring and really calm, and 90% of the time they go without a fight because we go about it in a certain way that
you've already done the groundwork,
removes their authority and removes their strength. I had done a lot of work with Lisa up to this point, and for I would say probably about a year, maybe even 18 months, every time I would see her, I had to fight with this demon, and it would not go.
So how did that look?
So we would make some progress in ministry, and then suddenly this would come to the front, the spirit would come to the front, and her whole attitude, her whole demeanor would change from being cooperative and engaged to being really stubborn, really agitated, angry, hateful. It would lash out, would use profanity towards me, would mock me.
Yeah.
Basically, challenge me and just go, you got nothing. I mean, like it would literally look you in the eye and go, you've got nothing. You can't do anything. And, you have to kind of keep calm in those moments. And I tried not to engage with that stuff so much.
Yeah.
I would retort and go, you'll see.
Mm-hmm.
God's greater. You'll see. I may not get you today, but I'll get you at another time,
Yeah.
So this spirit, because of the circumstances of the ceremony and the stuff that had been done to place it there.
Yeah, so there were rituals involved.
There were rituals, and the things that were done as part of those rituals, it did have a lot of authority in it. It felt very secure where it was at.
It'd probably never been challenged before.
No. And much of what you see in satanic worship, it is a mocking of what you see in Christianity.
Yeah.
And so this spirit actually had a name, and we called it the Dark Shepherd, which sounds very scary and ominous, but that's what it was called, is the Dark Shepherd.
And why did you call it that?
Because it kind of was a anti-Jesus figure.
Okay.
So, Jesus talks about being the good shepherd.
Yeah.
This was the Dark Shepherd.
Okay.
And it had that kind of position in her life, and probably in position in whatever they were doing, that was done to her. And so it required Christians of similar authority. So I would say whoever was leading the cult at the time was a part of that ceremony or that ritual.
Yeah.
And so it required a senior pastor, which Lisa was a Christian and Lisa attended church. And so it required a senior pastor to be a part of that.
Now, so she didn't attend our church, but it was another church. Yeah.
It was another church. And I'm not a senior pastor. I've never been a senior pastor. I've just served on staffs and had my roles. And so Lisa was very adamant that I didn't have the authority really to do it, that we needed to involve a senior pastor. So long story short, I had to call her senior pastor, who is part of quite a large, prominent church, very busy man,
and explain this to him. That would have been fun.
And explain to him, I need you to come and be a part of some deliverance ministry with me. And, at first he was like, why? And was not really on board with it.
No.
But thankfully softened and agreed to be a part of this.
Oh, that's good.
Now, the part that he really needed to play was to serve her communion. Now, in satanic worship, they do a very perverted version of communion, which I won't go into the details.
Yeah.
But she needed to sort of offset that by having this communion in this way with the senior pastor. Now, as far as I remember, and I could be wrong, I don't think she had had communion for many years because of the relationship or the what it meant to her.
Right.
It brought back those bad
Yeah,
memories.
it triggers the bad memories.
Yeah.
And then also you've got the dark shepherd probably stopping her from doing it. So.
Yeah. So she just didn't feel like she could do it. But for this ministry session, we had to do it. Now, as I say, I've been fighting with this demon for about 18 months, and it frustrated me so much.
Yeah, so this was not your first resort. This was the last resort.
And so we set up a date to meet. And now I'm a little nervous about all this because, one, my reputation's on the line.
Yeah.
I'm going to another prominent church pastor, so I'm involving him.
I mean, it's a really strange request.
It's a strange request. He's
obviously uncomfortable with it.
He's uncomfortable. He's not 100% on board, but he's, willing.
Understandably.
And so I'm also representing my church and my pastor who they have a relationship, and I know how this has gone in the past. It usually sessions where I confronted the dark shepherd usually ended in profanity and anger and, sometimes maybe even throwing something at me.
Now, I will give my input here because I remember this. I remember you were going to do that and that you were nervous about it.
Very.
And so I prayed for you. And I said to you before you left, I said, I feel like that God has the victory and it's going to go easily. Yeah.
And to, I guess, wrap it up, it really did. Like I thought, okay, how's this going to go, God? I really need you. I was very nervous about it for her sake because I just knew the disappointment. Like if it didn't go well, I knew the disappointment was going to be huge.
Yeah. Oh yeah. It's going to have big ramifications.
And then, like I
say,
then
what now,
Yeah. And then my reputation and the church's reputation, and I've wasted this pastor's time, except,
there was a lot riding on it.
So much on this. Yeah. Like it was really stressful.
But I've prayed about it and I really felt like God just said, it's going to be great. It's going to go easily. And the dark shepherd will leave without any problems.
So I probably need to explain. I think we maybe have talked about it in the past, but one of my spiritual gifts is discernment, and the way that is expressed is I see in the spirit. So I see demons and angels, and that's been a real blessing in doing ministry because I've learned to identify what I'm dealing with by how it looks.
And I can confirm that because when I did sit in with you and Lisa and did ministry together with you, which I didn't usually do, I was able to see in the spirit what was happening, which is not something I normally am gifted in. But because I was sitting with you doing it, I was able to see what was going on in my mind's eye.
That would be a fun podcast to talk about anointing and sitting under an anointing, because I've had that experience as well with other people. But that'll be off track right now. But yeah, I see these things. And so I always saw the dark shepherd. He looks a lot, at least he did to me, he looked a lot like death looks to me, the spirit of death, which is the Grim Reaper. Like most people understand that sort of image of the Grim Reaper. It doesn't have the little sickle thing, but it's a black hooded looking thing. It's a black hooded thing. You don't see the face. And when I see that, I normally know that's death. This was similar to that, except for it was quite large, quite brooding, and as I say, usually quite aggressive and angry and hateful, spiteful. And so as we were going through the ministry that day, I just had to kind of be brave, and I just went for it. And I confronted the spirit. I could see it, and it was standing there, but it seemed to be less aggressive than normal. What we did is we just, to be honest, it all sort of flashed before my eyes. You get so focused on something, and then you don't actually remember all the details. I just remember flashes. So I don't even know how we did this, but in the end, Jesus was the one that disrobed the spirit. Okay. So Jesus came in, and so I could see Jesus there, and he comes, and like I say, it looked quite big and muscular, but Jesus took the robe off of it, and it was nothing but bones. There was nothing under the robe. Like it was all kind of bark and no bite.
Yeah.
Jesus literally cast this thing out. Like I don't even know if I cast it out. Like if I said those kind of words, I don't know if I even did that. It was just gone.
Yeah, that's awesome.
And that was such a powerful moment. And so, as I say, I built up to this, had all this tension and nervousness and whatever else. And then in the end, Jesus just very gently and very authoritatively just conquered and cast out this demon.
Yeah, it's amazing. I love when he does that, and he always comes through. It may not be right at the moment that you think, but that took 18 months for that one spirit. That's a lot of meetings.
It's a lot of work.
It's a lot of hours. But then Jesus just had the victory.
It was, and Lisa was able to then take communion, and that, I really feel like in the time that we met together, there's 2 or 3 moments that I can point to that were just huge breakthroughs. Like a lot of the time you were just sort of toiling and working and kind of just plodding along, but then you'd have these major breakthroughs, and that was the first real major breakthrough that I was a part of. It was just such a blessing to sort of see. It strengthened my faith. We talk about Jesus and he has the authority and he's over all. But I tell you what, when you see it in action, you just really go, okay, Jesus is powerful.
Yeah.
Jesus is really, really powerful.
Yeah, I think doing deliverance ministry, it really drives home to you that we are in a spiritual battle and Jesus has the victory.
He does. Now, sometimes you've got to sort of really fight alongside him to find that victory.
Yeah.
That's why, like I often say, when people just say, "Oh, well, you have the authority and you cast it out and it's all done." Like, you haven't probably confronted a dark shepherd.
No,
so,
you probably haven't confronted any demons if you think that.
Sometimes, like I say, 90% of the time, I feel like it's quite, maybe even boring. Like I could almost
but that's
say
if you've
boring.
done the groundwork.
Yeah, but for this one, it was quite an exciting thing. But then the actual casting out, God just did it, and there was very little manifestation. There was very little resistance, and Jesus just did it. And so that word you had for me, I clung to that, and we saw it come to fruition that day. And like I say, that was a huge turning point in Lisa's life. So.
Yeah. And they, as we say, over that 10 years and then since, we have been close family friends with them. We go to their house for dinner. They come to our house for dinner. And we really care about each other and have built a relationship. And we see the fruit of all of that ministry play out in their lives. They were so bound up. Well, she was so bound up and her family was suffering because of it for many years. And now they're just a beautiful Christian family who love one another and they're all thriving. And yeah.
Yeah. Even down the road, God gave them another baby and all kinds of things. I could share lots of stories about Lisa, just the amazing things that God has done. But, I think with spiritual warfare, people often think about like the methodology or what prayer do you use, with...
like there's a formula.
Yeah, like there's a formula. And I know like Catholic priests use an exorcism rite, which is a set of prayers. And
we definitely have strategies that we go in with.
But, I think the biggest thing, the reason that Lisa was set free, and I'll share this because I would like to have her on one day and maybe share her whole testimony. You can actually hear it. We have talked about that. And when the time's right, I think she would love to do that just because it's such a tremendous testimony of God's grace and goodness and love and power. But when I first met her, she was pretty scary. I won't lie. She was pretty scary.
Yeah, intimidating.
Very intimidating. I was just going, okay, God, what am I getting into? I didn't have a lot of experience with people from satanic cults. Which
I don't think you had any, did you?
Maybe
one.
I'd had one.
Yeah.
One or two maybe before her. But I knew enough to know I didn't know much. You know what I mean? So going into this, I was going, God, do I get involved? Do I, really get involved? And this is often what happens to people that have the experiences that Lisa has had is they get scared off. They see it as too overwhelming and they run from it because...
Yeah. So when she found you, she had been rejected by many people in church and out of church. I mean, counselors, psychologists, psychiatrists, prayer ministry pastors, everyone had rejected her and walked away because it was too hard.
Yeah. So I just remember talking to God and going, should I do this or not? And he told me very clearly to just love her, just authentically love her and love her family and just show that love. Don't be afraid. Because, some people think courage is the opposite of fear, but actually love is the opposite of fear in spiritual realm. It's love. And so I committed to love her the best I could.
Yeah, I mean, you didn't know what to do.
No.
I mean, this is the thing with satanic abuse, like she endured. They are also programmed to be triggered if anyone ever tries to undo the programming that they've received. So the abuse that they receive is done in a certain way, so that if you're praying for somebody who's been satanically abused, and I've actually done this and seen it in front of me, like I've prayed for someone who's had satanic abuse and they've been triggered right in front of me, they will trigger and flip out, and they can go off and harm themselves and harm others, and it's dangerous. So it's quite overwhelming to go in and do ministry with someone in this situation, because you don't want to trigger them. You don't know what you're doing.
Well,
it's a lot.
I will say it's highly complex. I would say it is the most complex ministry that you can do, because not only are you dealing with spiritual elements like demons, you're also dealing with disassociation, which is where there are parts that have personalities and roles and agendas and all of that. You have trauma you have to work through. You have all kinds of things that you are dealing with simultaneously. So you might be dealing with a different personality that is demonized all at the same time. So it becomes really complex and hard to navigate. But God, again, like I learned a lot by spending the time with her, and would grow. I would just be able to grow and learn what was effective, learn what was not. But through it all, like I say, I think if I learned anything, it was to not be afraid and to show love. I think love is the biggest part of that. And because of that, that's why we have become those friends. Like I remember not long after I met her, there was an issue. She had a little girl and was of an age where they tend to induct them into the cult. And she knew she had those cult loyal parts in her. And she was very afraid that if she didn't receive ministry and get healing, that she would do something to hurt her child.
Yeah, this is why she came to see you.
Because it would be out of her hands and out of her control. Like the person, Lisa, that can be kind of sat back in the acting front. It's hard to put these words to everything.
But it's like almost someone else takes over.
Someone else takes over is probably the simplest way. Thankfully, God, again, worked in that. And when the little girl turned the age, had the birthday, we were at their house. I brought my whole family to her house. And this was early on. And that's where...
This is when we had little kids. So we rounded up our 3 little kids. One was a baby. And we went over to their house for dinner.
Yeah. So I just want to emphasize, like, that was a risk. I felt like that was a risk to take, but I committed to love them. And I felt like if I show fear and I don't go over and, spend this time with them, I'm not going to be authentically loving them. And so that's been the way all the way through.
And it was a decision I had to make too as a young mum.
Yeah.
To round up my kids. I don't know this person. You're just telling me there's a Satanist and we're going to go to their house for dinner and take our 3 kids. And I just said, yep, okay, let's go.
Yeah, you were very trusting.
Because I trust God, that's why.
But from that, as I say, and as you shared, this beautiful friendship has blossomed, and we care about them quite a bit, and they care about us, and it's just lovely. I'll share another story. We'll switch gears. So this
it's not completely dissimilar.
Not completely dissimilar, but not as successful as with Lisa, just because we never came to a place of healing. So I was ministering to another lady who had been through similar experiences to Lisa. She was going through a divorce and other things, and ended up staying with a family from our church because she needed a place to stay. And when she kind of found her own place, they were very aware of what she'd been through because she would share some of that stuff. And so they wanted to check their house and make sure there was nothing spiritually left behind when she left. And so part of what I used to do, I call it house cleansing, where we go through and we pray through a home. And if there's darkness there, we pray and remove it and invite Holy Spirit's presence and his light into that place. And it really shifts the atmosphere in people's homes. It's kind of like a blessing, like, you're blessing the house.
And so a beautiful Christian family lived there, and prior to her moving in, there would have not been these issues. They would have, you have authority over your own home, and when you invite the Holy Spirit into your home, that's what's there, and darkness can't stay. But because they invited her into their home, that became an issue.
Yeah, so she carried the darkness that was around her wherever she went. And here's another testimony of God's power. It was very isolated in the home. It was isolated to her room, and there was one other spot. Now, as I say, I have the spiritual gift of discernment. I see things, and this is how I do house cleansing, is I go room to room, and I ask God to show me if there's darkness there, where it's at, what's going on. And so as I recall with this, there was some sort of jewelry or a piece of some possession that she had that was left behind in the room, but it wasn't like out obvious. We kind of had to dig for it. We found that. Like, it's just one of those things, like God
pointed it out to you.
Pointed it out. There's something here, and we had to look around for it. And I call it my spidey sense. Like, I just have certain sensations. There are physical sensations that I can, I don't know what the word is, pick up or discern from if something is of God or if it's not. And so we found some jewelry, and of course we got rid of that, or a possession. I forget what it was. But the next thing was we went down into the living room, and I just had this sense, like I just kind of looked up at the ceiling. My attention was up at the ceiling, and it just felt like, I don't know if you've ever seen when spiders have the babies, and there's like lots of babies all at once, like they're all born, and there's just dozens and dozens
stuff.
Dozens and dozens of spiders. So in the spirit, I just felt like their whole ceiling was covered in spiders. Now, spiders, like spiders and snakes and crows and all that sort of stuff, they all have symbolism, and they all have meaning in Satanism and in the spiritual realm. And so spiders are one thing that I came to find out is a big deal in this particular satanic cult.
Okay.
So there's different satanic cults. I don't know if everybody wants to know all this. There's deistic Satanism and there's non-deistic Satanism. So Antoine LaVey, who started the Church of Satan in California, that's a non-deistic Satanism. At least they claim it, that they don't actually believe in a spiritual deity. Now, we know that they obviously operate in some spiritual stuff, so they know that there's a spiritual realm and things are happening and whatever else. But Luciferianism, which comes from Lucifer, Satan's original name, they are deistic, and they recognize Satan as a spiritual figure. And this is what this woman was involved in. And the spider is one of their main sort of emblems or symbols within this cult. And so while I was there, I saw these spiders. And of course, we prayed through it and removed them and, redid the atmosphere, the spiritual atmosphere of this home and cleaned it all out. And, they said it was different. As I recall, I think they were even having nightmares, and maybe the kids were getting sick. Like there was some overflow of her presence having been there.
Yeah.
And that all stopped after we prayed.
Okay.
But I ended up doing some ministry and had a session with this woman later, and she was like, "How did you know there were spiders?" Like, she was totally aware of it. She knew it was there.
Yeah.
Whether she put it there or not, I don't know. But she was like, "How'd you know?"
Yeah.
And just another confirmation of, God revealing what he wants to reveal.
Yeah.
Thankfully, that resolved very, very quickly.
Yeah.
And all, but we didn't get to really finish ministry with this particular lady. So
but it's different for everyone, and the person that is receiving the healing has to want to receive the healing. They have to want to give their lives fully to Jesus and to deal with all of the oppression in their lives.
Yeah, I think she had about sort of two minds about things.
Yeah.
I don't know that she fully was ready to commit, because it is a big commitment.
It is.
It's a huge commitment to get healing and to break away from this stuff. I remember she would come to sessions, and often I could just tell something was going wrong, something was happening, and I go, "You have on a piece of jewelry?" And she'd go, she'd give me a funny look. "Why? What's that necklace you're wearing?" And so she'd pull it out. She'd have it hidden in her shirt. She'd pull it out. "What is that?" "Oh, yeah." And it'd be something from.
Yeah, and so she's still, engaging with that. So she was back and forth. She wasn't committed to freedom.
No. And I'm not saying that she was insincere. I think she did want to be free.
Yeah.
But as I say, the commitment to do that is very high.
Yeah.
It's not a pleasant experience for really anyone involved.
It's a big cost.
But especially the person who needs the healing.
With Lisa, it was different. She was willing to pay the price, whatever it took.
She was committed.
Because she loved her family and she wanted freedom and she wanted to break away from all of that. And she'd had no choice to be part of it. It wasn't like she chose to be part of it. It was something that she was born into. And she had spent her life running away from it, but she'd never been able to find the healing that she needed and the deliverance she needed. And then when she came to you, it was just simply because you said yes. And when most people had said no. It wasn't any special thing that, you weren't equipped. You didn't know anything about it. You didn't know what to do, but you said yes. And then God gave you what you needed to help her.
Yeah, it was totally God-led. Don't get me wrong. I did go to workshops. I did read every book on deliverance, any resource I could find. And unfortunately, there's not anything that I know of that really addresses the full SRA, satanic ritual abuse methodology. There's a few folks that do it regularly and they have kind of their methodologies. I would kind of beg and borrow from that at times, but really it ended up being God had to lead it. Like,
there are even some in the psychological community who deal with it and have strategies for it. And I've read white papers about it from psychologists and academics. So it's well known. It's a well-known phenomenon, satanic ritual abuse. It's not something that we're just making up. It's well known throughout history across the world. But there are also people who have a stake in it, who try to discredit anyone who speaks up. And they call it satanic panic. Oh, look, it's satanic panic. When really they're just trying to silence and belittle and discredit the victims.
Yeah, totally. And it keeps them in that place. And this is why I say it's such a complex thing. You are dealing with so many different levels of fear, trauma, abuse, all these things. And they can come out all at once, or you might just be dealing with one part of it. But it's just so complex. And
then the people who do the ministry, which there aren't that many of, they often don't do it forever. They often just do it for a season.
Yeah, because it's pretty exhausting.
Yeah, it's so full on.
It is full on. Well, I guess that's a couple of fun stories, and hopefully we haven't given anybody nightmares.
Yeah, I mean, just be encouraged. Remember that God has the victory, always.
Always does. Well, thank you for listening to the podcast once again today. And thank you to those that have been commenting and leaving some likes. Please continue to share this with your friends and family if you think they need to hear it. We have lots of podcasts now on lots of different topics. So send one over to someone as an encouragement or something that they can learn from. This has been the Kingfisher Podcast with Eric and Bron Whitley. Have a blessed day.